Welcome to NCBA's Cattleman's Call podcast with host Lane Nordland.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Cattleman's Call podcast. I'm Lane Nordland. As we start today's program, we just would like to thank our friends at Dell for sponsoring the Cattleman's Call podcast. And no matter where work takes you, our partner Dell Technologies, it's here to provide you with the best tech solutions for your business. And they have a wide variety of offerings, from ruggedized laptops that are able to withstand extreme heat, cold force, and water that you can bring out onto the field or pasture, all the way to the back-end server solutions where you can store all of your operations data. NCBA members can save an extra 5 to 10% today by visiting www.dell.com/NCBA. Today finds us out in Washington, D.C. in the office of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association in their D.C. division. And there's over 70 young cattlemen and women that have been on the road participating in the 2023 Young Cattlemen's Conference class. And one of those participants comes from southeast Wyoming. Casey Atkinson, a rancher from out there in Wyoming, and she has traveled the world, worked in agriculture as a former livestock extension agent, been a public speaker, and today Casey's joining us to talk about ensuring the ranch is safe if you lose a loved one. That's a very difficult conversation, and it's one that we don't want to experience, but sometimes it's good to have some knowledge, some support, and insight in these difficult conversations. Today, as we mentioned, we are in Washington, D.C. It's smoky out there, Casey, because we have all that smoke coming in from Canada, but it kind of feels like we are out here like it's September or August back in the West with all this smoke.
It does. They were joking this morning. They're like, well, you must feel at home. It's just like August in Wyoming. And I was like, yeah, I'm not. Yes, it's not funny, but yes.
And it's just, it's. I don't want to laugh because we all know how wildfires are and how catastrophic they can be, but we have dealt with wildfires for so long in the West and seen how forests are managed or mismanaged, and it's alarming, but you can kind of chuckle a little bit at all these people in Washington, D.C. and New York City that, they are seeing some of the worst air quality and smoke conditions they have ever seen for generations, but again, something that we've just had to live with in the West.
Absolutely. I mean, it's truly terrible here. The sun is like bright orange because of all of the smoke, for those of you listening at home, but you just kind of want to go, I could fix that with some cows, lessen your wildfire danger if you just let me bring you some cows.
Again, I'm not laughing at the situation in terms of the wildfires, but just the people's reaction that, in watching TV, they're all about, California's had wildfires for years. And I'm just like, yeah, so have all the other states in between and been impacted by it all.
Absolutely.
Now, Casey, on your Instagram handles and social media, you're 10 miles past nowhere. And why is it important when people see that? They might go, what the heck? I get it. But where did that little bit of rural humor come from when you were like, you know what, this is going to be a great tool to reach people? But let's just talk about your social media presence.
Yeah, so growing up, I went to high school in Laramie, Wyoming, as a touch point for those of you who might know where that is. But the ranch is 85 miles away from there. So even the people I went to high school with had no clue where I lived. And so, my whole life growing up, people would be like, no, where do you live? And so I would just jokingly say, well, drive to the absolute middle of nowhere, and my house is 10 miles past that. So when it came time to choose a social media handle, that just kind of was like, I feel like 10 miles past nowhere would be the handle I should go with. And of course, anyone who's ever been to my house is like, you're such a liar. It's like 40 miles past nowhere. I'm like, no, you got to get to nowhere first and then go to my house.
And I was chuckling, you're talking to the gal that works the front desk here at the NCBA office, and or Hunter as well, with the comms team out here, and just discussing having a house in town. Yeah. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand, and even in rural places, like, well, why would you have a townhouse? Well, when you're that far away, education has to come into a person's life and be fulfilled, and a lot of people don't understand the concept of a townhouse.
Right.
I mean, they know
Liter-
what maybe a townhouse is, but not
Right.
an actual townhouse.
An actual townhouse. I mean, because literally, most winters, there's at least going to be a period of time when the road is closed. So you either have to be snowed in at the ranch or you are snowed out. And when you have to go to school every day, right, you need to be out. So, having a house in town just was the only way to make it work, really.
Or on the rural routes where it'd be wintertime, and I didn't have the issue because I didn't have long hair, but a lot of the girls on our routes would have to take a shower or bath the night before so their hair wasn't wet in case the bus broke down in the morning.
Yep.
And that's just things that, like, oh, that was pretty normal to think about, but I'm like, that could be so foreign to so many people, just kind of like that smoke coming out here.
Absolutely.
It's such a foreign concept when you're not faced with it every day, and that's and I want to get into that a little bit later, just talking about interaction with people on social media. But people are faced with food every day in their, when they're at the grocery store or doing an Uber Eats. But sometimes they don't think about the farmer or rancher that is raising that. I think we've seen a lot more of that with direct to consumer, but just a rabbit hole that Lane might go down. But growing up in that part of Wyoming, what was that like? What were some of your favorite memories of growing up in agriculture that ultimately led you back to being 10 miles past nowhere?
Yeah, when you grow up in the middle of nowhere, you just don't know any different, right? Now that I'm older, it's interesting to have conversations with people, even within agriculture, who are like, I just can't even fathom where you live, right? And so the older I've gotten, the more kind of unique I realize where I call home is, and what our ranching operation is like. But growing up, it was all you knew. And Dad was really good. I think from the second Mom would turn us loose, he was happy to take us with him and pack us around, and he didn't mind changing a diaper in the feed truck, just whatever. He just, he wanted his kids with him. And so, my memories are pretty much just all whatever Dad was doing, I was just right there. Trying not to get killed, probably, but stay out of harm's way. And so you were on a horse, or he was packing you around beside him on the tractor if we were haying, or you were riding around with him on the sweep, or, so a lot of probably my favorite memories, of course, what kid doesn't like being horseback, that grows up on a ranch, or, calving season. When you're little, it's all about just the cute calves, right? You don't necessarily register all of the heartache that goes with calving time that you definitely get to take in as an adult.
Yep.
But it was a lot of work. I don't think we took a lot of days off, but at the same time, for me, I just look back at it as being just really neat to just be there and to learn all of the things. And he turned us into really capable at really young because he needed the help. But as a kid, that registered as you were just really proud that you could do all of these things that you knew people your own age couldn't probably do. And so grateful for the all of the skills, that lifestyle, I think, equips us with, to really set us up for life later on.
Yeah, and just that sense of work ethic, but just working with family is something that people in the city don't have to do a lot of the time either. I know there are multi-generational family operations in cities. I'm not being, I'm cognizant of that. But, for some time, especially in rural communities, your friends or the people you go to school with, they don't understand. We were talking about where's 10 miles past nowhere. Sometimes they don't understand what you do. And, I know I was made fun of for, oh, you wear Wranglers. Oh, you wear boots. And there's a little part of me when I was younger, I was kind of embarrassed, about the farm ranch career, but that quickly went away. Did you ever feel any of that from maybe your peers in school? Like, oh, these people they're just ranchers. They don't know anything. Did you ever go through that, and how'd that make you feel?
I guess I don't necessarily remember feeling that. I mean, there were a lot of people who just, didn't understand, even in Laramie. I've always had pretty thick skin, and I probably just kind of have that kind of strong personality type that people are probably not going to want to make you mad. So, but some people just didn't care. They're like, oh yeah, that's Casey. She lives somewhere. I don't know. But, people, for the most part, I've been really lucky. I feel like people kind of ask you questions and they're kind of intrigued and interested in what you do. And Laramie was still pretty agriculturally based, even though we had the University of Wyoming. And so, of course, you've got a very different population in a college town, right? But very surrounded still by agriculture. And so, I probably kind of found my ag kids in high school, and you just kind of click off with them, right?
Well, and the reason I ask that, because I've talked to men and women that were turned away from the opportunity of coming back to the farm or ranch for several years because they're like, you know what? Just none of my friends understand it. I want to go do what they're doing and whatnot. So I always like to maybe ask people, about that aspect of it. And, in the intro, we talked about you being a world traveler. What were some of the places that you were able to go see?
So I've been to like 9 countries in Europe. I've been to Kenya and Africa. I've been to Southeast Asia. I've been to Belize. I've been to New Zealand. In fact, I'm not going to Antarctica. I live in Antarctica. We just don't have penguins, so I don't feel the need to visit Antarctica. But I've been to 5 continents now, and so South America is the only continent that's still left on my bucket list of places to go. So I have been very blessed and fortunate, to get to travel around and see as much as I've seen and kind of see some of the agriculture in those places and how different it is. But just, I feel like all of the travel I've done has definitely made me a better person, opened my eyes in so many ways, made me so appreciative of what we have here in the United States. Yeah.
So I guess, was this travel on your own, or did you have some opportunities through extension to do some of this travel, college? I guess, how were you able to go out and do all that?
So, as a judger in college, you definitely travel through some states, which is probably kind of what bit me, traveling through different states in the U.S. So I've actually only got 12 U.S. states left, up in the Northeast. That's the only place I've not been in the U.S. But it's all.
Don't fly there this week.
No, I'm not flying there this week. I've spent enough time on planes this week. It's pretty much all personal. I've been really lucky. I've got friends from all walks of life. And so, if anybody in my world says, hey, you should come visit me, I'm like, you better mean that, because I'm the one person who's going to take you up on that. But I've got a cousin in the United States Air Force, and he has been stationed at some really cool places. And so I've traveled around and seen him. That's how I ended up in Southeast Asia. And he was stationed in Germany for a while. I had a really dear friend who was actually a missionary in Kenya. And so lived there for about 5 years. And so while she was there with her husband and daughter, flew over to Kenya to take that in with them. And but it's all been, Dad and I went to New Zealand. It was the one time I got him to go do something fun with me. But yeah, it's really all been personal. It's just a passion of mine, and I've taken the opportunities when I've had them to kind of go on the cheap, right? When you've got a place to stay, it certainly cheapens up the trip. But it's just my goal in life. One thing that matters a lot to me, one, to see a beach at least once a year to restore my soul, and to see some place I've never been once a year.
It's so interesting having those opportunities, and I know there's people listening to this conversation right now rolling their eyes like, well, she claims to be a rancher and she's traveling the world and doing that. And I guess, what's your rebuttal to that?
I mean, if you don't believe I'm a rancher, just follow me on social media. And, most of the year you will definitely see me working covered in mud, covered in crap, covered in blood, taking care of the ranch and do what we need to do. One thing, when you live in the Klondike, winter is kind of a slow season because literally all you can and want to do is feed cows. And I've been fortunate enough that Dad is still very capable of doing that without me, because we send the main cow herd to a lower elevation to corn stalks in the winter because it's better for them and it's better for us. And so he doesn't have nearly as much livestock on the operation in the wintertime. And so that gives me the opportunity, in February before we start calving, to kind of take a little time and reset and get a break and restore my mental health and all of those things. See some friends, have a social life, talk to somebody, because I haven't talked to anybody in 11 months. Remember how to be human again. And so it's a good balance that we have found when when I came back to the ranch 6 years ago, it was a sacrifice, right? You gave up a future and a life that you were expecting to live in a way that you had lived a life on your own terms for almost 15 years, if not more than that. And so I'm very blessed that my parents were very understanding of that and knew that was something that was hardwired in me and important to me. And so have made a space for me to be able to do that. But I'm very intentional about when I go. Yeah. I'm not going in calving season. I'm not going when we need to irrigate or when we're haying or when there's cow work to do. I'm very intentional about when I take those opportunities.
You mentioned that mental reset almost, and how important is it maybe what are some tips you have for producers, especially young producers that are going back to an operation where maybe they lived in the city, maybe they've had a career away from farming and ranching, and how important it is to take time to just, whether it's going to Arizona for 3 days with your spouse or your friends just to reset, or go on an adventure, go on YCC, do something like that maybe isn't in your daily life. How important should that be prioritized in today's world, and especially for farmers and ranchers, not just young, but of all ages?
Well, we know that agriculture has like the highest suicide rate of any occupation. And I feel that every day. I mean, the mental stress, the emotional stress, the physical stress, the financial stress, right? It's always something. And it's a lot of weight to carry. And I think, I was talking with someone the other day, like the most common phrase that I hear in agriculture is people saying, well, there's always next year. Like we're the eternal optimists. Like no matter how bad this year beat us to death, well, there's always next year. But that's the phrase that you say over and over and over again, year in and year out, because it's like there's always something. If the cattle market isn't bad, then you're in a drought. And if you're not in a drought, you ended up getting hammered with some illness you'd never seen before, and so you're going to take a financial hit. Or, there's always something. And I think it's good that we're optimistic. I think you have to be optimistic. But I think sometimes we're optimistic to our detriment, and people don't feel like they can speak out and say, I'm struggling. I'm drowning. This weight, it's just too much for me. I can't handle all of these hits from all of these different areas. And so, for me, it's, can I find time to take my dog for a walk, which is not always the thing I want to do at the end of a long day on the ranch. Bam is 16. And so, he spends a lot of time in the house. It's good for him. It's good for me just to kind of take a walk and just look around you and try and reset and be appreciative of at least a few months of the year how beautiful the place is that I live, or to pick up the phone and connect with a friend and call and have a conversation. And remember, you have friends that want to pray for you or talk to you or help you if you're having a bad day. If you follow me on social media, you've probably watched me have a couple breakdowns on Instagram, because I try to be very transparent and very authentic. And if I'm having a bad day, I want to be very authentic about that. And so, some days, if I've lost 3 calves that day, you're probably going to click on and see me in tears on my stories, talking about how hard that is. And it's amazing, like the people who will then reach out to you, and just check in on you and have a conversation, and just releasing some of that, I think is very healthy and very helpful, instead of trying to keep a smile on and, yeah, this is great and everything's okay and fabulous and I'm dying inside. But, just try to release some of that weight is really helpful.
Well, and that's one thing I appreciate about your post too, is because in so much for people that are influencers outside of agriculture, it's all the picture perfect world. And so many people that are posting that, no, that's not really how it is in the real world. But in agriculture, I think it's so important and inspiring for even other producers to see that real, raw emotion. Because, yeah, like you said, it's an emotional time every day on a farm or ranch, but especially calving time. I mean, we put so much into that type of work, and when you lose a calf or lose one of your best cows or whatnot. But the other day, I was watching an interview with Michael J. Fox. He's had Parkinson's for over 30 years, and in the quote that he said, he goes, "With gratitude, optimism is sustainable." And I'm like, whoa, with gratitude, optimism is sustainable. And I'm like, so every day I've tried to just write down what I think about in my head, what I'm grateful for. And I just think that's so important for farmers and ranchers to do, because we get sucked into the wheel well, and when it's a bad day, it turns into a bad week and month,
Right.
and we talk about that mental health, and we have so much to be grateful for, but it's tough when the bank's calling some days, and when it's not
Absolutely.
raining.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I kind of went down a tangent right there, Casey. But you know, your work in extension. What was that like? I was an extension major at Montana State University, so I went through a lot of great courses and worked with a lot of people, and then I found myself as a broadcaster. But what was that work like, and how fulfilling was it working in extension?
So extension was not a career path I thought I would ever end up in. When I left college, I actually ended up working in higher education for 8 years, which was also not a planned career path, in case anyone was wondering. And so coming out of that, I wanted to transition back into industry. I missed my people, let's say, even though working with college kids was a great advocacy platform, right? Because I was working with kids who were first generation from other countries, urban America, clear across the country, literally knew nothing about agriculture. And so we had a lot of fun conversations, but extension was kind of the logical fit to meld that higher education experience with kind of the ag background I grew up in. And I mean, it definitely had a lot of tear your hair out moments, but it also was really fulfilling. I think being able to work with youth in the livestock programs was certainly rewarding. But for me, one of the benefits of extension was I actually got to become a BQA trainer. And I'm really passionate about the beef quality assurance program. And so the opportunity to, try and engage with fellow producers and encourage them to get that certification and be able to walk through that with them and share with them why it's so important. And all of those things was something I felt really grateful for in extension. And then, of course, extension agents, you get a bunch of extension agents in a room and great things can happen. And so, really great people to work with. It was fortunate to be part of a really good, healthy culture. With agents in other counties, we worked together a lot and got to do some really cool programming. And so I missed that aspect of it. But it was, I don't always miss the long days that come with extension.
Oh, but extension agents are such a backbone of rural communities, and I think sometimes they get overlooked. And I just know, I mean, whether it's the family consumer science side of things, leadership development, or the livestock agent position, they're just vital for our rural communities. And that's why I'm such a fan of land grant universities like Wyoming and Montana State University, because they truly keep agriculture rolling. So, like you said, you get agents in a room, a lot of stuff can happen.
Yes, for sure.
So, Casey, you and I have done interviews before, and leading up to the opportunity to work with family your whole life, and then working outside of the ranch for several years, can we talk about why you came back to the ranch?
We can. So, coming back to the ranch was never part of my life plan. So I have a younger brother named CD, and it was always known, growing up, he was the one who was going to come back, take over the family ranching operation, continue the legacy, where we've been for forever. And that was fine. I felt like I was meant to do other things. I had been gifted with other skills and whatnot that was going to allow me to go out into the world and be successful and hopefully use my voice to be a champion for agriculture, but the beef industry in particular, and my people who I love dearly. And so I was doing that, forging a path in life. And my brother finally made the decision to come back and take over the family ranch. He had been home for about 2 weeks full time. And I say when people hear me speak that everyone's life changed in the span of one failed heartbeat. And that was the moment my brother's heart stopped beating. And so for those who don't know, my brother passed away completely unexpectedly 7 years ago in May, We just celebrated the 7-year anniversary of losing him. And so, just that quick, my future changed because it was just the two of us. And, I'm so proud of my family's legacy and history. And, how can you not be when you spend every day looking around at what your great grandfather built and sacrificed for? And so it wasn't really a choice, I guess, that I was going to come home. My dad, I think at the time was, well, he's just about to turn 80. So he definitely needed support and help if he was going to keep doing the only thing he'd ever known. And so it wasn't a choice. I had actually just been, sorry, getting a little emotional over here.
I am
but
too, so.
Lane and I are both going to be crying here in a minute. And so I had actually just been promoted to county director a month before he died. And with that came some massive changes for my staff and my office. And so I didn't want to leave anyone in a lurch. And so I stayed for a year in my position to try to get everybody settled and going, while also simultaneously trying to go home as much as possible to keep my parents going. And then I went back to the family ranch, and I have been there ever since, giving my dad lots of gray hairs, or maybe he's giving me gray hairs. I don't know which is happening more. But yeah, to be there and to keep us going and take over, hopefully, the family ranch one day.
And how much of an emotional support system have you been for your dad through this, and your mom? I mean, because obviously he lost a son, he lost a brother, but that family, that sense of family and hard work, had you not been able to come back, how would he have maybe handled that?
So I think it's different. Well, it is different.
And if I'm getting too personal, you just say, Lane.
No, this is good. For me, it's so important for me to use my voice and make good of losing my brother, and having these conversations and sharing this. If it helps anybody else, then that's a victory for me. So, it was hard on me to lose my brother, obviously, but it was devastating to my parents to lose their child. It's a different dynamic. Mm-hmm. I don't have kids. But I can only imagine, those of you out there, to lose a child out of order, right? No one expects to bury their child. And so, man, that first month was hard. And I took off a full month. I mean, I was home the next morning when I got the call late that night that he was gone. So I was home the next morning, and I think it was over a month before I went back to work, because we were calving, we were still feeding cows, there was irrigating that needed to be done. And so you just go in to keep the wheels on the bus mode, right? Like, this is mom and dad, they need to grieve. If they can't get out of bed, they can do their thing. I will make sure that this whole operation at least, kind of gets to the finish line. And so, I'm grateful that it's part of my personality makeup that I could find the grit and the strength to be able to do that. And you kind of push your own grief off to the side, and you're like, I'll get there later. That's cool. I'm gonna do what needs to be done. And for anyone who knows any of my story, it gets a lot worse than just losing my brother. And we're about to probably get into this from an estate planning and why that's my passion to talk about. But, we found out that my brother was married the day after he died. And we didn't know that. And, he had barely known this person, and it upended our world in the worst way possible. And so you're not only dealing with the grief of losing a child, but it was a nightmare. I mean, that's the kindest way that I can say about what my family then spent the next 2 years having to navigate, because of this other person in the equation that we didn't know was there. And what we were put through and the things that happened to us, it was a nightmare, is the nice way to say it. And so you compound all of that on top of everything else, and it was unimaginable what we went through. I wouldn't wish it on someone I hated. much less someone I liked or didn't know. And so, I hope that, my parents and my dad in particular would think that I'm helpful to have around and, to be there and to help carry that weight, and that hopefully it gives them some, if they are having a bad day, that they know I can step up and take care of that, and it's one less worry. And, we've never talked about it, so I'm just totally making assumptions on their behalf. But I hope it has been helpful to have me there to help carry that load, and to be there with them through that process. Because again, right, it's a very unique situation that we live in, that A, I was able to do that, but B, that, that's kind of how we function. Because most families who lose someone, right, you kind of all go back to your corners, and maybe you live in different places, different states even. And so to have the opportunity to really kind of walk through that as a family, I think is pretty unique.
And grief and stress and the good that has come out of the last few years of really talking about mental health and stress counseling. Because it just used to be we don't talk about things, or you just go out into the North 40 and, you go mow some grass, or, I'll deal with it on my own. And grief and stress and mental health, it can all just kind of just come together. I guess, what's your advice for folks out there that are dealing with anything that is truly just bringing them down? How important is it to reach out to folks out there, whether that's just a neighbor to have a conversation, or to make a call to one of those anonymous phone lines just to talk with folks? How important is that?
Gosh, I think it's so important. I mean, again, it's just, there is a weight lifting in just speaking it into existence, right? And for a lot of people, that's the hardest part, right? You're worried about the judgment, you're worried about what people are going to say or what people are going to think about you. But I mean, I don't think I would have come through it had it not been for the people who stepped up and were like, we're here. We don't know how to help you. We don't know what to say, but I'm here. I'm here by your side. I had some phenomenal friends that just were like, tell me you need to vent. You want to talk about how awful this is. You can say all of the things that you shouldn't say out loud, but say them, and kind of release that. Can we help you do something? I mean, we talk about just having been promoted to county director, you lose your brother, your parents are struggling, and then you have all this other stuff. And so, I mean, my staff was phenomenal, and like, you need us to cover an event, you need to go have a breakdown in the back, we'll cover for you, and people really are amazing when you give them the chance to be. Not to say you shouldn't be intentional, just don't go talk to anybody, but find the right good people, and they really will. They will have your back. And like I said, just speaking it into existence lightens that burden, I think, so much. And is so therapeutic and so helpful. Even if people don't know what to say, they don't need to know. Just be there and listen.
So maybe going back to that conversation about just planning, estate planning, wills, everything. And it's so, my wife and I, we have a will, and it's just so weird to think about, like, okay, if something happens to us, this is where our daughter's going to go, or that, this and that. It is just, it's a difficult conversation. It's an awkward conversation. What are some just tips you have that you maybe share with folks about, because estate planning can be long, it can be tedious, it's going to cost money.
It's expensive.
And lawyers are not cheap. But just the emotional toll that you went through and your folks went through, and what are some just basic tips that you share with folks? Because again, I've done podcasts on my personal podcast about estate planning. We could spend weeks talking about the different aspects of things or how to organize it. But what's a Cliff Notes version that you share with people when you're out and about or speaking or sharing on social media?
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so let's not take anything I say as any type of legal advice. But you have to have the conversation, no matter how hard it is. If you have to find a mediator or somebody to come in and help you navigate those conversations, then do that. But have the conversation. And there's a difference between succession planning and estate planning. So succession planning is really about the people. How are we going to transfer? Who's going to take over when? Whatnot. Estate planning is really about protecting the assets to make sure that you can keep the operation together in the next generation, that they're not going to get eaten alive with inheritance taxes and end up having to sell the operation to pay those, which is a whole nother discussion. I think both are equally important. We know that a lot of people don't get to the estate planning, and then the operation goes to market, right? And so I think both are really important. But one, I think I tell people that anyone who's going to be affected by the plan, succession or estate, either one, deserves to be part of the conversation, right? Even if they have no decision-making power, they at least deserve to hear from the person what's going to happen. This is what I'm thinking. This is how you're going to be impacted. And they have the right to speak out about that. Because as hard as that may be to hear on both sides, it's worse when you don't get to say it at all, right? Or when you find out at the reading of the will or the whatever, what's going to happen to you. If you do make the decision to go ahead and get an estate plan, which I obviously highly recommend, finding the right lawyer is critical. It's not about who's convenient or who's easy. A lot of times maybe the best decision for you would be to actually utilize a lawyer in a different state who can partner with a lawyer in your state to file the paperwork properly and do all those things, but somebody who's really an expert in this area because it is so unique. And who has done enough of these to see things, because where we got bit, we had an estate plan. My parents had spent thousands of dollars to have an estate plan, right? But it was all done under the assumption that they were going to die first, and that isn't what happened. And we didn't have the protections in place to, think about a wife we didn't even know that existed. I mean, who thinks that they need to plan for that? Hear me loud and clear. You probably had a plan for that, just in case. Because, no one ever dreamed my brother would make that decision. But if it can happen to us, it can happen to you. And so, thinking through all of the different scenarios and getting everything in place, you need somebody who has actually worked with agriculture families and has seen some of the messes and understands how to navigate those. But, for the people who are like, I just don't want to, it's too hard. I don't want people to be mad at me. I don't know what to do. I don't want to think about dying. Whatever the excuses are, I always come back with, well, as somebody who has lived this in the worst way imaginable, let me tell you that the best gift you can give to the people that you love is a plan. So that on the day that you die, they don't have to fight it. Grief brings out the worst in people, the absolute worst. And people who didn't want anything all of a sudden want their cut. Money brings out the worst in people every time, compounded with grief. It's just the way we are as human beings. And so the best gift that you can give to people is to leave them with nothing but grief. And that sounds odd, but it's true. Leave them with nothing to do but grieve you. They don't have to fight. They don't have to worry. They don't have to negotiate. They don't have to trade. They don't have to figure it out because they know, okay, this is already done. It's how it's going to go. And all I have to do is grieve this person that I love so much.
Well, those are all very, very important points, and thanks for sharing that. I mean, and just the challenges that you and your family have faced to go through that, but to be able to share what you've learned is so important. So I really appreciate you doing that on social media and with us here today.
And I want to ask you about your experience on the Young Cattlemen's Conference, but I would just like to mention again
Dell Technologies for sponsoring the Cattlemen's Call podcast and partnering with cattle producers across the nation. And as we mentioned earlier, that no matter where work takes you, because we know that on our operations. It can take you anywhere. Our partner at Dell is here to provide you with the best tech solutions for your business, and they have that wide variety of offerings from those ruggedized laptops that are able to withstand extreme heat, cold, force, and water that you can bring out on the field to the back-end server solutions where you can store all of your company's data. NCBA members can save an extra 5 to 10% today by visiting Dell.com/NCBA, and that 5 to 10%, that goes a long way, and all of our operations are getting more advanced, and it's good to have that good technology. So big shout out to Dell for helping support producers out in the countryside. You have been on the Young Cattlemen's Conference for the last few days. I do want to bring that one up. I went on this trip in 2016. It's long, it's tiring, but you learn absolutely everything about the industry that you've grown up in. Mm-hmm. We all grew up in this industry, but I'm cow-calf. Same for you. But learning about feeding and learning about the processing aspect of things and the retail and the policy, it's really eye-opening, and to meet people from all these different backgrounds. What has your experience been like over 8-9 days?
8-9 days. Well, I need a nap. It is. We're not joking about it being tiring. I think two of my favorites. We'll just go there. One, certified Angus beef was so much fun as a tour stop, and I think that's probably new to our tour. I'm not sure that previous classes have gotten to stop there, but that was really cool to kind of see like that branded beef program and how they have gone through things and how that really works and operates. Because I don't think that's also something we really get to see when you're a cow-calf and you're not really that far in the chain. And as an advocate, the networking and the people, because I want to be the best advocate I can and always speak with credibility and integrity. And I know that things are so different across the country. Even within the state of Wyoming, things can be very different. And so for me, getting to hear how other people are, the challenges they face in their part of the world, how managing an operation, even if they are cow-calf and I'm cow-calf in a different part of the world, how that works. And just know that I'm going to have all of these connections now. If I have a question, that you have all of these people you can reach out to around the country and be like, hey, tell me about this. So that you can then turn and have a conversation with someone else who is interested in it is definitely a high point for me. Pretty cool.
Now I know you'll be heading up to the Hill to meet with Senator Lummis here in just a little bit from Wyoming, but it was interesting last night before the baseball game. Some of the folks got to go to the Nats. The Washington Nationals play baseball, and I know I don't want to hold you up here, but it was so interesting because I've learned about black vultures from producers, but just sitting with some of those producers from the South, and they were learning about wolves.
Yep.
And I learned, the different managements that Montana and Wyoming have, just the different strategies they have in managing those wolves and whatnot. I learned from you, and you learned from me, hopefully, but just those conversations about the predators and whatnot. I know Senator Lummis understands that very well, being from Wyoming, but just having those conversations too, just to share, these are the challenges that we face, and now these people understand that as well, and they can even talk about that with their elected officials here this week.
Absolutely. They were talking about the black vulture bill, and if we want them to support us and lesser prairie chicken and wolves and grizzly bears, like we need to be supporting them in their black vulture. And so being able to help spread awareness of things in different parts of the country so that we can all support one another and get those things accomplished is super important. And so great conversations have been had this week.
Well, Casey, thank you for joining me here today. I've only been a part of this trip for a day and a half, and it's taken its toll on me. Just for our listeners, I'm not as young as I once was. There's a Toby Keith song about that, I think. But Casey, for folks that would like to learn more about you, maybe reach out if they have some questions or just like to follow you on social media. Let's talk about that social media handle again, or how they can reach out.
Absolutely. So it's 10 miles past nowhere. The number is 10 as in 10 and then miles past nowhere. Or I have a website. They can go to CaseyAtkinson.com and there's a contact form on there so they can get a hold of me if they want to do that get a hold of me for speaking, or if they have questions or whatnot, they can reach me that way. But Instagram is my main platform. So if you want to follow daily ranch life on a very isolated ranch in Wyoming, that's where you'll find me at most days.
Well, Casey, thank you so much for joining us, and have fun on the Hill today meeting with your elected officials.
I will. Thank you, Lane.
Well, friends, that will do it for this conversation on the Cattleman's Call podcast. I'm Lane Nordland. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to NCBA's Cattleman's Call podcast with Lane Nordland. For more information, visit ncba.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast today.